Okay, so welcome back to Kill a Mockingbird, and we have chapter 28 and 29 today. On page 263, what's interesting for me is the town's motto. It's in Latin, Macomb County ad astra per aspera, and this is right down the bottom of 263. So that means, said Mrs. Merriweather, translating for the rustic elements, from the mud to the stars. So why did I put that in? I think that's just an interesting point for us. It sounds very similar to the Auckland Grammar logo. So it's interesting that a book that was written in 1960 in some way is sort of similar to the motto of Auckland Grammar School. Now, a key idea in this chapter is that there is actually some action going on. So Scout and Jem go to a Halloween party, and they're walking home, and it's dark. It's very, very dark. And suddenly they are attacked. On page 268, we have, on about the fifth or sixth line in, Jem, help me, Jem. Something crushed the chicken wire around me. So what is the reference to chicken wire? That's part of Scout's costume. Metal ripped on metal, and I fell to the ground and rolled as far as I could, floundering to escape my wire prison. From somewhere nearby came scuffling, kicking sounds of shoes and flesh scraping dirt and roots. Someone rolled against me, and I felt Jem. He was up like lightning and pulling me with him, but though my head and shoulders were free, I was entangled. We didn't get very far. We were nearly to the road when I heard Jem's hand leave me, felt him jerk backwards to the ground. More scuffling, and there came a dull, crunching sound, and Jem screamed. Okay, so this fight is happening in the dark. As I've said, the children are walking back from a Halloween party. They don't know why Mr. Ewell is attacking them, and to be honest, they cannot actually see him for a while. So, towards the bottom of 268, the man began moving around as if searching for something. I heard him groan and pull something heavy along the ground. It was slowly coming to me that there were now 4 people under the tree. Atticus? The man was walking heavily and unsteadily towards the road. I went to where I thought he had been and felt frantically along the ground, reaching out with my toes. Presently I touched someone. Jem? My toes touched trousers, a belt buckle, buttons, something I could not identify, a collar and a face. A prickly stubble on the face told me it was not Jem's. I smelt stale whiskey. So at this point, we're on page 269. Basically, Scout is, she's touching with her foot the body of Mr. Ewell. She doesn't know who he is. Obviously, Jem does not have a beard. Jem does not drink whiskey. I made my way along in what I thought was the direction of the road. I was not sure, because I had been turned around so many times, but I found it and looked down to the street light. A man was passing under it. The man was walking with the steps of someone carrying a load too heavy for him. He was going around the corner. He was carrying Jem. Jem's arm was dangling crazily in front of him. Okay, so Scout is very confused. Who has taken her brother? Now, page 275, chapter 29. A very interesting idea that Mr. Tate has come. Mr. Tate is the sheriff. In the middle picture at the top, standing next to Atticus, is Mr. Tate. Now, he has come to Atticus's home to figure out what has happened. And so what we find on page 275 Atticus fetched the remain of my costume. This is about the 4th or 5th line down. Mr. Tate turned it over and bent it around to get a good idea of its former shape. This thing probably saved her life, he said. Look. He pointed with a long forefinger. A shiny, clean line stood on the dull wire. Bob Ewell meant business, Mr. Tate muttered. He was out of his mind, said Atticus. Don't like to contradict you, Mr. Finch. Wasn't crazy. Mean as hell. Low-down skunk with enough liquor in him to make him brave enough to kill children. He'd never have met you face to face. Okay, so that's page 275. Mr. Ewell has been killed in this fight, this altercation, and the sheriff has said that Mr. Ewell is a low-down skunk with enough liquor in him to make him brave enough to kill children. It's page 275. So if you think of a skunk is an animal. Liquor obviously means alcohol. Atticus shook his head. I can't conceive of a man who'd... Mr. Finch, there's just some kind of men you have to shoot before you can say Heidi to them. Even then, they ain't worth the bullet it takes to shoot 'em. Ewell has one of 'em. Atticus said, I thought he got it all out of him the day he threatened me. Even if he hadn't, I thought he'd come after me. And the sheriff is explaining exactly the destructive tendencies that Mr. Ewell has had in the town. We're still page 275. He's had guts enough to pester a poor coloured woman. He had guts enough to pester Judge Taylor when he thought the house was empty. So do you think he'd have met you face to face in daylight? Mr. Tate sighed. We'd better get on. Scout, you heard him behind you? Yes, sir. When we got under the tree. How'd you know you were under the tree? You couldn't see thunder up there. I was barefooted, and Jem says the ground's always cooler under a tree. Okay, so basically what are they deciding to do there? The sheriff is deciding to rule that Mr. Ewell tripped up and fell on his knife. Okay, so who was the man that came to save the children? We have a picture up in the top right corner of Boo Radley. Now this is why this book is incredibly powerful. It's a very interesting book. All of part 1 we heard about Boo Radley leaving chewing gum for the children in the tree, the children sneaking to Boo Radley's house and Jem losing his trousers and nearly dying in a shotgun blast, Boo Radley coming to put a blanket on the children during the fire. And this is the first time in part 2 that we have heard anything of Boo Radley. For something like 10 chapters, there's been no mention of this man at all. And he has come to save Jem and Scout. In the dark, he fought Mr. Ewell. So, the last 2 paragraphs on page 276, the first time Scout has ever seen Boo. I looked from his hands to his sand-stained khaki pants. My eyes travelled up his thin frame to his torn denim shirt. His face was as white as his hands, but for a shadow on his jutting chin. His cheeks were thin to hollowness. His mouth was wide. There were shallow, almost delicate indentations at his temples, and his grey eyes were so colourless I thought he was blind. His hair was dead and thin, almost feathery, on top of his head. When I pointed to him, his palms slipped slightly, leaving greasy sweat streaks on the wall, and he hooked his thumb in his belt. A strange small spasm shook, as if he heard fingernails scrape slate. But as I gazed at him in a wonder, the tension slowly drained him from his face. His lips parted into a timid smile, and her neighbour's image blurred with my sudden tears. Hey, Boo, I said. So a very interesting description of Boo on page 276. I would really emphasize that his eyes are colorless and gray. Okay? He's wearing khaki pants. His face is as white as his hands. His cheeks are thin and hollow. His mouth was wide. Any of those things are worth writing down. So tomorrow will be the Friday class, and hopefully we will finish the book. We have chapters 30 and 31 to go, and that will be really fantastic. So when we come back to school on Monday, we will have completed the novel. Don't forget we have the reading log next Tuesday, so please prepare for that. Thank you very much.